Hello and hi, welcome to another video tutorial on concepts of cost and management accounting. In this video, we will be talking in detail about the divisions of cost and the preparation of cost sheet. In our journey so far, we've spoken about the different concepts of cost accounting. We've learned the classifications of cost, methods of costing. In the earlier video, we spoke about the elements of cost. In this video, we would be talking in detail about divisions of cost, which you would find in a cost sheet. And we would also be learning the preparation of cost sheet. So with that, let's get started. In our journey so far, we have come to an understanding there are three elements of cost: material, labor, and expenses. We've also seen that each of these elements of cost can be further classified as direct and indirect. So from that point of view, I would like to present the elements of cost to you in a slightly different angle. The total cost of an organization can be further classified as direct and indirect. The total cost that is incurred by an organization can be further classified as direct and indirect. So again, when we talk about the direct expenses, you have three subdivisions: material, labor, expenses. When we talk about the indirect expenses, that again has got three subdivisions: material, labor, and expenses. Now, talking in detail about this, the sum total of all the direct expenses in an organization is referred to as prime cost. The sum total of all the direct expenses in an organization is referred to as prime cost. The sum total of all the indirect expenses, it is referred to as overhead cost. So in other words, whenever we add up material, labor, and expenses, all this put together is referred to as the prime cost of an organization. Whenever we add up the indirect expenses, all this together is referred to as the overhead. In short, it is written as OH. Now let's get into the discussion about what are the divisions of cost. So divisions of cost, whenever you end up incurring or categorizing elements of cost, these can be further clubbed into different categories, which helps us or which facilitates the decision making process. So based on that, we could have different divisions of cost. So that is what we would be discussing now in detail. But before that, let's get into an understanding about overheads. Overheads refers to all the indirect expenses that your business incurs in terms of running an organization. Now, overheads are often not related to the manufacturing of a product or rendering a service. Now, these are expenses that you incur in ongoing activities in your organization. So we could think of the example of a telephone bill. The telephone may not be an integral part of your production activity, but without the telephone, your business may not be able to function smoothly. So this is what is referred to as overheads. Now let me present to you the divisions of cost. What we have learned so far is that direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, all this put together is referred to as the prime cost. Now, depending on which level of your hierarchy in the organization that you end up incurring the overhead, it can be categorized as factory overhead, administrative overhead, selling and distribution overhead. So if you have indirect material, indirect expenses, or indirect labor at factory, all that is put together as factory overhead. If you have indirect material, indirect labor, indirect expenses as a result of your administrative activities, that is referred to as administrative overhead. If you have indirect material, indirect labor, indirect expenses as a part and parcel of your selling and distribution activity, that is referred to as selling and distribution overhead. The sum total of direct material, direct labor, direct expenses becomes the prime cost. Prime cost plus factory overhead becomes factory cost. Factory cost is also referred to as works cost. Factory cost plus administrative overhead becomes the cost of production in your organization. Cost of production plus selling and distribution overhead becomes your total cost. So this is how prime cost, and overheads in an organization gets divided, and this is referred to as the divisions of cost. Now let's discuss in detail about the cost sheet. What is meant by the cost sheet? So cost sheet is a document that gets prepared that talks in detail about the different expenses that your business is incurring. Cost sheet is also referred to as a production statement. It presents the total cost. It presents the cost per unit of the goods that you produce. Now, whenever you end up categorizing costs into a cost sheet, it usually gets presented based on the three elements: material, labor, and expenses. Why is this being done? This is being done to help you to carry out a comparative study. With the help of the cost sheet, the management would be able to decide the total cost that they incurred in terms of producing a product or service. Based on that, they would be able to go about deciding the selling price of that particular product. Now let's discuss in detail about the cost sheet. Whenever we start off with the preparation of cost sheet would always start off with direct material, direct labor, and direct expenses. This is referred to as the prime cost in an organization. So the sum total of direct material, direct labor, and direct expenses in an organization is referred to as the prime cost. Prime cost plus factory overhead or works overhead, that gives you the factory cost or works cost. Works cost or factory cost plus office and admin overhead gives you cost of production. Cost of production plus selling and distribution overhead gives you the total cost or cost of sales. Now, along with this, whenever you end up adding your profit component, that will give you the total sales of your organization. So with that, we've discussed in detail about the cost sheet. What I've presented over here is a summarized form of the cost sheet. Whenever we prepare a cost sheet, always remember in your cost sheet, you would be indicating the total cost as well as the cost per unit. So whenever the cost sheet gets prepared, please remember we always have to showcase the total cost and cost per unit. Now let's